Hi, everybody. I'm Alice K. Rucklehouse from SufferingWell, and today we're going to talk some more about why Catholics use statues and stained glass and paintings in their worship. All right, is it idol worship? So we've talked first of all about the Ten Commandments and why the Catholic Ten Commandments and the Jewish Ten Commandments and the Protestant Ten Commandments are different. So if you're thinking, oh, the Catholics changed the Ten Commandments or something, go back and watch that video. I think it's part 2 in this series, and you'll find out about that. And then we talked about the whole thing about graven images, that Protestants say that the Bible and the Ten Commandments say not to make graven images, and that is part of it. But I explained in the last video why we don't have that as a separate commandment, and the Jews don't have it as a separate commandment either. So today I want to ask the question that you're probably asking. So then why do Catholics use statues? All right, so there's several different aspects to this question. And one of them is, again, what we were talking about in the last video, which was about graven images and about how God actually commanded some graven images to be made. And that was after the Ten Commandments, after he'd given the Ten Commandments. So why did he command those to be made? Okay, he forbade the worship of statues, but not the religious use of statues. So he had them make them for 2 reasons that we see in the Bible. One is as part of the decoration of the temple. And it probably wasn't just decorative. It's there for a reason. It's there to be instructive, which brings us to the second use, is that it's instructive. It's something that we can look at, and we look at a statue of a saint or of Mary or Joseph, and it reminds us of them, and it reminds us of what they stood for, what they did that's a good example to us, and so we can learn from that. All right, so for example, Protestants use pictures in Sunday school classes. Okay, you have pictures of the Bible stories and everything. Those are to remind people of certain events. It's to help teach the kids about them. But then we use them for adults as well. And I think that here's where the part of the difference, I think this is my theory. I think that part of the reason why Protestants are so against statues and Catholics have always used them is because for a large part of the history of Catholicism, most people were illiterate, and so they couldn't read the Bible. They needed to have those things put before them in artwork. So you have stained glass windows that show pictures of the Bible stories. So you could go into a Catholic church, especially an old one. Some of the new ones, not quite so much, but the old ones have a lot of stained glass windows. They're beautiful, but they're there for a reason. They're there to tell the story from the Bible. They're there to tell about usually it's specific Bible stories. Sometimes it's stories about saints. Saints are people who we can look to as an example of how we ought to live. They were special for a particular reason. For example, Maria Goretti guarded her virtue and was killed because she wouldn't allow herself to be raped. Or they might, some of the saints like Felicity and Perpetua that I did videos on recently, they were killed because they were Christians, just because they were Christians. Okay, so and there are people all over the world today who are killed or put in really horrible prison camps, or tortured because they are Christians. And so those statues, those stained glass windows, those paintings were a way of people being able to remember that because they couldn't read their Bibles, which I want to say something parenthetically. So a lot of times you hear that that the Bible wasn't available to the common person. Okay, so first of all, they couldn't read. So that would kind of make it unavailable to them. So that's why you've got the stained glass and everything. But just so you know, in Catholic masses, we read parts of the Bible every single day in Mass. And in 3 years, you've heard the whole Bible. So every 3 years, you've read the entire Bible. Some people, I'm talking to Protestants now, some Protestants will read the Bible every year. Some people never read the entire Bible. But in a Catholic church, you do hear the Bible read all the way through, every single verse, over 3 years. So, and then the homily usually is talking about that. So, it's just a different approach to how the Bible is read. And that's done again because people used to be illiterate. Now that people are literate, and now that there are books and Bibles aren't super expensive, you can have your own Bible. Catholics are being encouraged to study the Bible. And, one of the most popular podcasts is not just among Catholics, not just among Christians, but in the whole world. One of the most popular podcasts is Father Mike Schmidt's Bible in a Year. So the Bible is really important to Catholics. It's just that for many years, Catholics were just people, were illiterate. They did have a Bible available, and those were chained to an altar or to a table or something. And so people go, oh, they were chained to it, so people weren't allowed to have them. Well, no, the common person couldn't afford a Bible because it costs hundreds of dollars, or the equivalent of that. It was very, very expensive because they had to be hand copied, and the materials were expensive. So there weren't very many of those available, and a common person wouldn't have been able to afford it. But they could go and they could look at the Bible if they wanted to. If they knew how to read, they could go and they could look at it. The reason it was chained there was because it was so expensive. Just like some of you who are younger, you won't remember this, but those of us who are older, we remember the phone booths where you could go out in public and you could make a phone call and you put money into the phone and everything. But if you needed to look up what a phone number was, we had the white pages and the yellow pages. Those were in a phone book. Those were chained to the phone because if somebody took it, then nobody else could use it. If someone took the Bible from the church, then no one else would have access to it. And the church might not have access to it, even for the masses that were being said. Masses, not masses of people, but the mass, the worship service, basically. That wouldn't even be available for the worship service because somebody had stolen it. And it would take a long time to come up with the money to have somebody copy another Bible for them. Okay, when Protestantism started, the Gutenberg press, I think it was about the time of Luther. I know that somebody in Wittenberg had gotten a printing press. And so, it was really exciting to have something to print up. So they got a hold of the 91 Theses, they printed it up, those got published all over the place. So when Protestantism started, a lot of people were literate, and it was easier to get books. It was easier to own a book by yourself. So Protestants, I think, haven't had as much need historically for statues and windows and pictures because they could read the Bible. It's taken a while for Catholics to kind of change their traditions about that because for so long people were illiterate. So this is the way that they did it. And I don't think that they're ever going to stop having statues and windows and paintings, because that is part of our heritage and part of our tradition as Catholics. And it is very, very helpful. So it's not that now that we have books that we don't need those, but I think that it was more of a need back then than it is now. So it's a little bit hard to understand why that was such a need unless you think of it historically. Okay, I'm going to continue this video on a separate video because this one's getting too long, but come back tomorrow for more about this. I will see you later. I love you all. Bye-bye.